Welcome back to Coffeesodes, everyone. It's time for our 26th deep dive. And, those fires in LA have really been on my mind lately.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
My heart goes out to everyone who has been affected by that tragedy. It's just a terrible reminder of how destructive these wildfires can be and how important it is that we get better at detecting them early, before they get out of control.
Yeah, it's just heartbreaking to see the devastation that these fires cause, and it really highlights how much we need better technology so we have a chance to prevent these huge disasters.
Absolutely. And that absolutely brings us to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at a research article called Forest Fire Detection Based on Spatial Characteristics of Surface Temperature.
Okay.
And it's all about a new method that they're calling STF that uses data from the Himawari 89 satellites to try to pinpoint these forest fires.
That's right.
And forest fires are a problem all over the world, and the effect they have on people and property and the environment is just devastating. And climate change is making it even worse. So we really need a reliable and accurate way to detect these fires early on. And this STF method, it seems like a really big step in the right direction.
Okay, so let's sort of unpack this a little bit. Can you explain why we need a new way to detect fires? What's wrong with the methods we're using now?
Well, imagine you're trying to find a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is constantly changing size and shape.
Okay.
That's kind of what it's like trying to detect fires using these traditional satellite methods. They often rely on these fixed temperature thresholds. So basically, they're just looking for any spot that's a lot hotter than the area around it.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. The problem is that surface temperatures, they just naturally fluctuate a lot. A sun-baked rock or a patch of dark pavement can get as hot as a small fire, and that leads to false alarms. And on the other hand, smaller fires, or fires that haven't gotten really hot yet, those can go undetected. Plus, you have things like cloud cover that can really mess these systems up.
Ah, so it's like trying to see a candle flicker in a snowstorm.
Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah.
So how does this STF method get around those limitations?
Well, STF takes a more sophisticated approach. It's all about creating a localized temperature map, almost like a custom-fit suit for each area that's being monitored.
Okay.
It considers things like the type of vegetation, the elevation, even the angle of the sun, anything that might change the surface temperature, and this creates a much more accurate baseline to compare to.
So instead of just looking for these hotspots, STF is analyzing how much hotter an area is compared to what would be normal for that specific location.
Exactly. It's called surface temperature reconstruction, and it's the first key step in the STF method. Then comes the really clever part. It's called spatial feature fire point recognition. And that's where the system compares these reconstructed surface temperatures to what the satellite is actually reading. And if it sees a big difference, meaning a temperature spike that's not normal, it flags it as a potential fire.
So it sounds like STF is doing way more than just looking at raw temperature data. It's almost like it's using what it knows about each area to predict where a fire might be starting, even if it's still small and smoldering.
You got it.
Yeah.
Because it's based on this localized temperature model, STF is really good at finding those low temperature fires that other methods miss. And those early warning signs are so important to stop a small fire from turning into a raging inferno.
Right, because once it gets going,
Exactly.
it's much harder to stop it.
And this is where it gets even more impressive. Remember I mentioned cloud cover and how it's a big problem for traditional fire detection?
Right?
Well, STF has figured out a way to work around that.
Wait, seriously? It can see through clouds?
Well, it doesn't really see through clouds. It can figure out what the temperature is beneath the clouds based on the surrounding data and that localized temperature model it created. So it can basically fill in the gaps, and that's a huge advantage when you're talking about accuracy and early detection.
That's amazing. Okay, so how do the researchers actually test this thing? Did it actually work in the real world?
They did their tests in Hunan Province, China. That's an area with a lot of forest fires.
Okay.
They wanted to compare STF to the existing methods and see how it would perform.
And how does it live up to the hype?
The results were really impressive. They used high-resolution images from GF4 satellites and official fire records to validate their findings.
Okay.
And get this, STF had a 0% emission error rate.
Wait, a 0% emission error rate. So you're saying it didn't miss a single fire?
That's right. It caught every single one.
Wow.
And its overall accuracy, which they measured using a comprehensive evaluation index, was always above 0.74, which is way better than the other methods they tested.
That's incredible. So it's not just about detecting fires that are already out of control. It's about seeing those really early warning signs before they even become a problem.
Remember how we were talking about how good STF is at spotting those low temperature fires?
Yeah.
Well, the research supports that. They've found that STF could detect a lot more of those low temperature fire pixels than traditional methods.
So it's like having a super sensitive smoke detector
Yeah.
for the whole forest.
Exactly.
It's picking up those tiny little wisps of smoke before they can even become a fire. That could be a real game changer for saving lives and property and protecting those ecosystems.
Absolutely. The potential benefits are huge. Faster response, times less damage, and maybe even saving lives. But of course, no technology is perfect, and there are definitely still some challenges to work out.
Right, there's always a but. What are some of those limitations and what still needs to be done to improve it?
Well, one challenge is just scaling it up. The researchers tested it in Hunan province, but imagine trying to use it over much larger areas or even globally. That's going to take some serious fine-tuning.
So it's kind of like having a perfectly tailored suit. It fits great in one spot,
Right.
but you might need to make some adjustments if you want to wear it somewhere else.
That's a great analogy. And remember how STF needs to reconstruct that surface temperature based on all those factors?
Yeah.
Well, the accuracy of that reconstruction really depends on having enough data.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what are the researchers working on next?
They're really focusing on how those variations in the amount of data might affect how well the model works, especially in different kinds of environments.
Okay.
And then there's the whole cloud cover issue.
Yeah.
We know STF is really good at handling clouds, but they're trying to make those cloud removal algorithms even better and more precise.
So it's about making STF even more adaptable.
Exactly. And we have to remember that this is all still under development, but those early results are really exciting.
It is really fascinating. But I'm curious about the bigger picture. Beyond just the technical details, what are the social and environmental implications of a technology like this?
The impact of STF on how we manage wildfires and protect ecosystems, and even how we design our communities could be huge.
Yeah, it seems like we've just scratched the surface of this conversation.
Yeah.
There's so much more to talk about. We've been talking a lot about early detection and putting fires out, but is that always the right approach?
That's a really interesting question. In some ecosystems, fire is actually a really important part of keeping things healthy and balanced.
Wait, really? You're saying that sometimes it's actually better to let a fire burn?
Exactly. It might sound kind of counterintuitive, but think about it this way. Forests have evolved with fire for a really long time. In some cases, fire acts like a natural reset, clearing out all that underbrush and reducing the amount of fuel, and it can even help some plants to actually thrive.
So it's kind of like a controlled burn.
Exactly. And this is something that indigenous communities have known and practiced for generations. They understood that fire is a natural part of the ecosystem, and they used it to manage the land in a sustainable way.
That's amazing. It just goes to show that sometimes when we try to control nature, it can actually cause more problems.
Yeah.
So if we're talking about different perspectives, we also need to talk about the big one, human activity.
Absolutely. Human actions are a huge factor in both starting fires and making them worse.
Right.
We're talking about arson, carelessly throwing away cigarettes, sparks from machinery, even the way we design and build our communities.
Yeah, it's like we're setting the stage for disaster without even realizing it.
You're right. And as we build more homes in fire-prone areas, what they call the wildland-urban interface, that risk just keeps getting bigger.
So it's not just about technology like STF, it's about taking responsibility for our actions too.
It's all connected.
So what can we actually do? Where do we go from here?
Well, education is a big one. We need to make sure people are aware of the risks and how to be more responsible, especially in fire-prone areas. Campfire safety, making sure cigarettes are put out, completely clearing brush around homes, those things can make a huge difference.
Yeah, it's about individual responsibility and being more aware of our impact.
Exactly. And on a bigger scale, we need to look at how we manage our land. We should think about prescribed burns in certain areas and how our development patterns are affecting wildfire risk. It's all about finding that balance between fighting fires and letting them play their natural role.
And that balance is probably different depending on where you are and what the environment is like.
This conversation has really helped me see how complex wildfire management is. It's not just about putting out fires, it's about understanding them and how human actions play a part and figuring out how we can live with fire in a way that keeps everyone safe.
Absolutely. And I think that's a perfect place to end our deep dive today. It's been an amazing journey from those satellite images to these bigger questions about how we live with fire. I think we've all learned a lot. And on that note, we'll be wrapping up this episode of Coffeesodes. We hope you found this deep dive thought-provoking, and we encourage you to keep learning and exploring these issues. Until next time, keep those coffee cups full and stay curious.